soft and fluffy white sandwich homemade bread at home with no preservatives or additives. Can you believe this bread is made without a stand mixer or any special equipment? I'm gonna show you how I make this by hand. And I'm not a baker, so if I can do this, you can too.
Hello, this is not a bread making channel, but today I'm sharing something special as I show my Bible study classmate how to make American style white sandwich bread at home without a stand mixer by hand. This is a beginner friendly recipe, and I want to give thanks to the God of the Bible that gave me the faith, the patience, and the experience to experiment with this, because without which we would not have this video and its contents today.
For equipment, all you need is
A 9 by 5 inch loaf pan, an oven, and a digital scale in grams. If you do not have a digital scale, you can find the converted recipes in measuring cups and spoons on the blog post. I have also converted this recipe into ounces for those of you who prefer to measure in ounces. But some of these ingredients are in such tiny quantities, any digital scale in grams can really make a difference in its outcomes due to the accuracy of measurement. All right, let's go bread making. We're taking a type of bread that is
typically commercially manufactured
and uses commercial ingredients like dough conditioners, additives, and preservatives, and commercial mixers, ovens, to achieve this soft, fluffy consistency. We're trying to take this type of bread and replicate it at home without the commercial ingredients and without a stand mixer. So we need a lot of time and patience to achieve this outcome. So if you've never made bread by hand before, I suggest setting aside an entire day to follow this process and gain confidence.
Into a bowl, add 350 grams of bread flour, 20 grams of sugar, 4 grams of instant yeast. Make sure it is instant yeast, not dry active yeast. Mix well. Add 3 grams of salt, then mix. We add the salt after so it doesn't have direct contact with the yeast. Add 210 grams of water, 48 grams egg, which is 1 large egg. Using a spoon and starting in the center, mix it into a cream. And as the cream thickens, it will turn paste-like. The goal of this step is to hydrate every bit of flour until it comes together into a wet, lumpy dough. I'm switching to a spatula because it's easier, and I scrape every bit of flour I can find and press it into the dough that is starting to form. It may feel like there's not enough water, but there is. The liquid is inside the dough, so when I press the flour inside, the flour gets hydrated. This is what the wet lumpy dough looks like when it's done. Transfer this lumpy sticky dough onto a bench. This dough is very sticky. A stand mixer can knead this type of dough easily and quickly to develop the gluten, but our hands cannot because the dough is too sticky to handle. So we are going to use time to help us develop the gluten so that we can handle the dough and knead it. Take a look at this. The gluten is not developed. That is why the dough is tearing easily. By the way, quick tip. Always wet your hands before touching sticky dough so it doesn't stick to your hands. Cover the dough with a large bowl and let it rest for 30 minutes. We're going to see that time is going to develop the gluten. 30 minutes passed and we saw the dough relaxed. Check this out. See how much gluten has developed by resting 30 minutes? Time helps gluten to develop and strengthens it. Using wet hands, pick up the dough and slap the dough onto the bench. Then fold it into half. Turn the dough 90 degrees. Slap and fold. Turn, slap and fold. Turn, slap and fold. Repeat this no more than 10 times. Then fold over the seam and pull the dough towards you into a ball. Turn the dough smooth side down. Gently stretch the top 1/3 of the dough and fold and press it 2/3 of the way down. Turn 90 degrees, gently stretch, fold and press. Turn 90 degrees, fold and press. Turn 90 degrees, fold and press. And this is how to knead by hand. Knead for 5 minutes and we'll start to feel the dough becoming smoother and less sticky. When kneading with 2 hands, I use my fingers to fold and bring the dough towards me, and I use my palms to press and push the dough away from me. One of the things we want to get used to is handling this slightly sticky dough. This is what gives the bread this beautiful rise and soft, fluffy texture. If you start to feel the dough getting a little bit sticky, slap the dough on the bench and fold it. Slap and fold. Nope, still too sticky. Slap and fold. Repeat a few times until the dough becomes slightly less sticky to handle by hand. By the end of this 5 minutes, the dough will be slightly sticky but not wet, and it will be smoother and tighter. Don't worry if it is not perfect because we're not there yet. Let's take a look at the gluten development. It is improving, but the dough still tears easily, and this is what I'm expecting. So let's turn the dough over and pull the dough towards yourself into a smooth ball. Cover it with a bowl and let it go on its second rest for 30 minutes. During this second rest, weigh out 15 grams of softened butter. "30 minutes have passed, and I want to show you something beautiful. Oops, sticky dough, need to wet my hands. Look at this beauty, this beautiful strong gluten that has developed." Turn the dough smooth side down. Gently stretch the dough into a thin layer without breaking the dough. Spread the softened butter all over the dough. The reason we add the butter now is because butter coats the gluten strands with fat, which limits gluten development. This is why we develop the gluten to a certain strength and then add the butter so we can have the best of both worlds. Fold the dough into thirds, keeping the butter inside. Then roll the dough from the shorter side to the other into a ball. Then we're gonna knead for 5 minutes using the same fold, press, and turn method. This time, the goal of this step is to knead the butter until it is completely incorporated into the dough. You may feel the greasiness of the butter oozing through the dough, and it may start to feel like the dough is losing its smoothness and maybe even tearing. This is normal because butter weakens the gluten structure of the dough. So keep kneading for 5 minutes and the greasiness will subside as the butter is fully incorporated into the dough. Take a look what happens when we add butter into the dough in a stand mixer. See in slow motion how the dough starts to split into two? This is the butter effect. And I know through making this in the stand mixer, eventually the butter will get fully absorbed, producing a beautiful, soft, silky, non-sticky, not dry dough. So keep kneading by hand until the butter is fully incorporated into the dough. If it gets too sticky, you can use the slap and fold method to help. Then continue to knead by hand when the dough is more manageable. We're done when all the butter has been incorporated and the dough is smoother, no longer greasy, and slightly sticky to touch. Because we're using hands, the dough will look slightly rough, like this. And that's okay because the next step will develop the gluten further. Cover the dough ball and let it rest for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, look at this beauty. You can see the gluten is a lot stronger and able to stretch a lot more without tearing. Flip the dough smooth side down and knead for 1 to 2 minutes to turn it into a smooth tight ball. Fold it into half, turn 90 degrees, fold and press, turn, fold and press, turn, fold and press. That's how we knead it into a smooth tight ball. Alright, and this concludes all the steps we would have used a stand mixer for. In a large mixing bowl, add a drop of oil and glaze the bowl with clean hands or a brush. We don't need a lot of oil. The purpose is to allow the dough to rise freely. Place the dough ball in, smooth side up, cover with cling wrap or a silicone cover, and let it rise in a warm place until it doubles in size, which for me is about 75 minutes. Time is a guideline here. Once the dough doubles in size, you can move on to the next step. While waiting for the dough to double in size, take your 9x5-inch loaf pan and glaze it with a little oil so the bread won't get stuck to the pan while baking. To prevent the exterior of the bread from becoming too oily, I line the loaf pan with parchment paper. The dough has doubled in size. Transfer the dough onto the bench, smooth side down. I'm punching down the dough to deflate the air bubbles inside. Gently stretch out the dough into a rectangle without tearing it. Try to match the length of the rectangle to the length of the baking pan. And I'm continuing to flatten the dough with my hands to deflate the air bubbles inside. Fold the two short edges of the dough inward like a letter fold. Lightly dust a marble or plastic rolling pin with a tiny bit of flour along with a light dusting on the dough. This prevents the rolling pin from sticking while rolling out the dough. There are two goals in this step. The first, roll out the dough so that its new short ends match the length of your loaf pan. And two, using the rolling pin to press out as much air pockets as possible because this type of bread has a fine and even crumb texture. So we want to keep the air pockets small and uniform. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can use a clean, dry glass jar without stickers. That works just as well. The rolling pin material matters because we're working with a stickier dough. If you're using a bamboo or wooden rolling pin, it's really gonna stick. So place a sheet of parchment paper over the dough before rolling to prevent sticking. We don't want to add too much flour as a slightly sticky dough will rise higher, resulting in that soft, fluffy, stretchy texture. Once the short ends of the dough has reached the length of the loaf pan, tightly roll the dough from one short end to the other. My bench is not long enough and you can see the end here, the dough could be flattened more. So I'm going to use the rolling pin to roll it flatter to get all the air bubbles as tiny and as even as possible. At the end of the roll, pinch the seam tightly so that the dough holds its shape during the final rise and baking. I'm also going to pinch the ends of the roll. A final press down on the roll to deflate any air bubbles and place the dough into the parchment-lined loaf pan. Cover with cling wrap and let it rise until the dough rises to the height of your loaf pan. And for me, that is about 75 minutes. Preheat the oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. The oven is preheated. Let's place our risen bread onto the middle rack and bake for 30 minutes. Check the bread after 10 to 15 minutes, and if the crust of the bread has turned golden brown, cover it with aluminum foil to prevent it from burning. This bread is soft and very hot. Slicing hot bread results in gummy slices. So, as tempting as it is, we must let the bread cool on the rack for at least 2 hours before slicing, because the bread continues to cook even after it is out of the oven, and the steam and moisture inside needs time to escape, and the cooling process allows the gluten structure to set, which results in that beautiful, soft, and fluffy crumb texture. After about an hour, when the bread is cool to touch, place cling wrap loosely over the crust, and that will keep the crust soft. It's slicing time. See how the cling wrap kept the crust soft? Slicing tip, turn the bread onto its side. Can you believe we made this without a stand mixer? All by hand and patience? Because this is a very soft bread, slicing from the top where the crust is harder than its side puts a lot of pressure on the loaf, whereas slicing from the side gives you more control and makes it easier to get even slices. Let's look at this beautiful crumb texture. Soft, fluffy, stretchy. This is beautiful. I'm so grateful. See how soft this is? There's no preservatives in this bread, so I set aside what we will consume over the next 24 hours and I freeze the rest by individually wrapping them in cling wrap. This prevents freezer burns and can stay in the freezer for at least a month. To thaw, leave it out at room temperature a few hours before or overnight, or simply pop it into the toaster at the lowest setting. Here is an overview of the process. You can find this on the last page of the printable recipe that you can download for free. It includes all the steps covered in this video in written form. You can find the link in the description box below.
And that's it. I hope you give this a try. I'm not a baker, and if I can do this, you can do this too. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Jesus said to them, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me shall not hunger, and whoever believes in me shall never thirst. John chapter 6, verse 35.